Hello, students. Welcome back as we finish up our notes on this fun topic of fungi. And yesterday we talked about some of the general characteristics of fungi and the structure of different kinds of fungi. Well, today we're going to be discussing the reproduction of fungi as well as different types of fungi. So let's get right into our notes with reproduction. Not all reproduction is the same. Fungi reproduce in more than one way. There are two types of reproduction in the fungi kingdom. The first one is called budding. Not the buddy system, but budding. Budding takes place with unicellular fungus like yeast. So unicellular, one-celled fungi reproduce by means of budding. And if you look at the illustration here that you are drawing, we start off with an individual cell, one cell, and you can watch as it goes from one step to another here. This protrusion comes out, bulges out until eventually we get to daughter cells. And essentially, this is the same process as mitosis that we learned about last unit, if you remember. And so reproduction by means of budding with unicellular fungus results in a second generation, which is genetically identical to the first generation. So the daughter cells are essentially clones of their mother. Now imagine that. Are there any daughters among you? Girls, can you imagine being an exact copy of your mother? Think about that for a moment. You'd be your mother's twin, essentially, a clone of your mother. And then if you had children, your children would be exact clones of you. Well, that's what life would be like if you were a unicellular fungus, because they reproduce by means of budding. And yeast is an example of a unicellular fungus that reproduces in this manner. And they can reproduce rather quickly, as we will observe ourselves in the near future. So here's an illustration of a unicellular fungus reproducing. And so let's check this out. So you can see that very quickly, one yeast cell can very rapidly develop into thousands of yeast cells, which is why if you've ever done any baking, you can put some active yeast cultures into your bread or cake or whatever. It doesn't take long for that to pop up from all of the waste gases that are being released by the living yeast cells. We're going to watch that in real life tomorrow for the lab. Be a little bit more exciting than the animation. But let's check out another video clip here. This is pretty wild. Check this out. Whoops, sorry about that. Let's try that again.
Asexual reproduction in amoeba and yeast. Reproduction is the biological process by which organisms produce new offspring. There are two methods of reproduction: sexual and asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is the mode of reproduction in which the offspring arises from two parents from the opposite sexes. Asexual reproduction, on the other hand, is a reproduction in which the offspring arises from a single parent.
Actually, I'm going to pause this here. You can watch this on the website, actually. I thought this was a different one, so I'm going to move ahead to the next slide, and that one isn't the one I was thinking of. So let's talk about the second way of reproduction in fungi. The second way is through spores. Spores take the role, if you will, kind of like seeds in plants, but spores are not seeds. But here's the deal. Multicellular fungi like mushrooms will pop up a fruiting body. That's what we actually call a mushroom. When you go to the store and you buy mushrooms, or you have mushrooms, on a salad or what have you, that is only the reproductive structure that you're consuming. Again, most of the organism, the hyphae, are found below the surface. The mushroom is what pops above the surface. That's just the fruiting body or the reproductive structure. In the case of mushrooms, it's what we call the mushrooms. And in the fruiting body, and this can take place in a number of different ways, the fruiting body can swell and fill with spores, which are like analogous to seeds, but they're not the same thing. And these spores, when the fruiting body is mature, the spores are released from the fruiting body. And this can take place rather explosively, as we're going to see in this next video, which is what I thought that previous video was. So let's check this one out with the super slow-mo guys. That was pretty wild, wasn't it? I mean, Pilobulus, those poo-eating fungi accelerate faster than a speeding bullet. In fact, they accelerate faster than Superman. Imagine that. All right, let's finish up today by discussing the three forms of fungi. The first form is called mold. If you have ever had a fruit bowl at home with oranges like this, or bananas, or what have you, and they were left lying in there for too long, then you've probably seen mold growing on them. Or maybe a loaf of bread, and the bread has been laying around for too long in the bag. You can see the mold growing on the bread. Well, mold is a fuzzy fungi, and it often grows on old food. Remember, fungi are heterotrophs. They have to find their food from somewhere else, and sometimes it might be from the food that you eat yourself. So keep your food fresh, and when it expires, throw it out. Give it over to the mold, because once the mold takes hold of that food, there is no desire to eat it any longer. So mold, fuzzy fungi, often grows on old food. And, well, let's check out a certain kind of mold here. There's some interesting creatures here on planet Earth, and that's one of them. All right, second form of fungi are the ones that I think are most familiar to us, the mushrooms. And I don't know, I'm really loving these video clips here. I'm going to show you one more video clip of mushrooms. This one is, I think, pretty cool too. Check this out. By the way, a mycologist is a mushroom scientist.
mushroom mycelium represents rebirth, rejuvenation, regeneration. Fungi generate soil that gives life.
The umbrella's opening.
The task that we face today is to understand the language of nature. My mission is to discover the language of nature of the fungal networks that communicate with the ecosystem. And I, in particular, believe nature is intelligent. The fact that we lack the language skills to communicate with nature does not impugn the concept that nature is intelligent. It speaks to our inadequacy of our skill set for communication.
Did you catch what he was just saying? He believes that he can talk to mushrooms. I wonder what kind of mushrooms.
We have now learned that there are these languages that are occurring and communication between each organism. If we don't get our act together and come in commonality and understanding with the organisms that sustain us today, not only will we destroy those organisms, but we will destroy ourselves. We need to have a paradigm shift in our consciousness. What will it take to achieve that? If I die trying, but I'm inadequate to the task to make a course change in the evolution of life on this planet, okay, I tried. The fact is, I tried. How many people are not trying? If you knew that every breath you took could save hundreds of lives into the future, had you walked down this path of knowledge, wouldn't you run down that path of knowledge as fast as you could? I believe nature is a force of good. Good is not only a concept, it is a spirit. And so hopefully the spirit of goodness will survive.
Yo, talk to your mushrooms. Okay. All right. So let's identify what are mushrooms more specifically here. Well, they are multicellular and they grow a reproductive structure. And that reproductive structure, again, is what most people refer to when they say the word mushroom. They have a visual image of a basically just the reproductive structure of the entire body of a mushroom. But here is that reproductive structure of a mushroom. So starting at the bottom and working our way up, we have the hyphae. Again, the hyphae is where the bulk of the body of a mushroom lies under the surface. These multicellular cells with numerous nuclei is what spreads out so much. Now, above the hyphae, when a mushroom is ready to reproduce, it sprouts up a fruiting body. And this whole thing is called a fruiting body, but in the case of mushrooms, the stalk is what the structure is actually called. And the stalk is propelled upward, which has a cap on it. And when the spores, which are found in the gills, are ready to be released by the mushroom, then the cap opens up. The ring is the remnant of the cap when the cap opens like an umbrella. And then the spores are released from the gills. So make sure you have all of these different structures identified on your diagram in your book. You might see something like this on this week's quiz. Hint, hint. So study. It is not a stem. It is a stalk. Remember, mushrooms are not plants. They are a completely different species and organism altogether. All right, let's move on to the third form of fungi called the yeast. Yeast are unicellular, and well, let's watch a quick clip here on yeast. I think this is the last clip of the day here. Yeah, this is the last clip of the day. Let's watch this, and we won't watch
the preservation of the developmental biology film series was made possible by generous contributions from Distinguished University Professor of Geosciences Lynn Margulis, Terrence Malick, Chelsea Green Publishing, The Politics and Practice of Sustainable Living, the Hardy Lane Foundation, the International Symbiosis Society. GeoBook Studio, publisher of The Biggest Picture.
Let's get to it here. Check this out. We can see budding yeast. Very exciting. See it? We'll watch more of it on Thursday. All right, so what are yeast? Yeast are first and foremost unicellular. Unicellular, obviously, that means they are one-celled organisms. Yeast undergo what is called anaerobic respiration. Now, you may recall from earlier in the year the difference between aerobic and anaerobic. Anaerobic respiration, what does it not require? It does not require oxygen. Okay, so yeast don't need oxygen in order to respire. That's why you see the little guy holding his breath. But that's not what yeast look like, by the way. All right, yeast are used in baking. If you've ever baked bread or have ever eaten a sandwich and looked at the bread on which your sandwich is made, you'll notice all the bubbles in bread. Well, those bubbles are the result of yeast cells releasing waste gases. They are releasing carbon dioxide gas. Now, they don't have mouths or bottoms, so the waste gases are not like our waste gases, but they are diffused out of the cells. And you remember what diffusion is from last unit. But these gases, the carbon dioxide gas, is what allows dough to rise, whether it's bread or cake or pizza dough or whatever else it might be that you might be baking. Yeast has been used by humans for thousands of years. And again, yeast is a type of fungus. Think about that. We use fungus in our food to make it rise. Another application that humans have taken advantage of with yeast is not only the gaseous waste material, but also the liquid waste material. You see, not only is yeast used to make bread, it's also used to make alcohol, because alcohol is the liquid waste of yeast cells. So with wine, the yeast are given fruit to eat. And so wine is produced as the liquid waste material. With beer, yeast are given grains of some kind in order to chow upon as their food, and their liquid waste results in the production of beer. So when you come of age and you have the opportunity to choose whether or not to drink alcohol legally, remember what you learned today about what alcohol is. It is the liquid waste of a unicellular fungus known as yeast. And so that concludes our notes for today. And tomorrow we'll be performing a little lab activity dealing with various forms of fungi. So stay tuned until tomorrow for that. And also don't forget to study for your quiz on Friday. So until then, I will say bye-bye.